Stride Audio Show.
Presented by Speak English with Us.
Quick question. When the Part 2 card drops, do you usually feel calm or do you freeze up instantly?
Be honest, Maya. I've seen people stare at the card like it's written in ancient code, and I've done that too.
If that sounds familiar, you're in the right place. This is a B1 level episode, perfect for intermediate learners. Beginners, you're welcome too.
And if you're listening while pretending to review vocab but actually panicking over IELTS, we see you.
The brutal part is this. You've helped people, visited places, felt emotions, and still the second the timer starts, your brain goes blank.
Exactly. You've got a real story, but under pressure it just won't come out in a clean line.
Then you say one sentence, maybe two, and after that you start to trail off.
Or you try to buy time with, yeah? So, and suddenly the room feels much bigger than it should.
That's the frustrating part. Not a lack of English, but a lack of a path.
And that path is what today's episode gives you. We're not talking about a rigid script. We're talking about a way to keep moving when your mind wants to lock the door.
So here's the promise. By the end, you'll know how to take one tiny idea and flesh out a full 2-minute answer without sounding fake.
And we'll show you how to do it with simple, natural transitions so your answer can circle back instead of collapsing.
Quick, 3-second check if you had to choose. Would you rather get a place card or a person card? A or B, no overthinking.
I know you're probably already picking keywords in your head, maybe even whispering them to yourself like a tiny coach.
Stay until the end for our word tour 5 expressions that'll help you keep talking when your brain tries to quit.
And later, we'll give you one tiny trick that makes your answer feel less like a memorized speech and more like a real story.
So if Part 2 has ever made you sweat for no reason, stay with us. Because this one's for the moments when you know the answer is somewhere inside you.
And we're gonna pull it out step by step, without the drama of a full mental meltdown.
Let's open with a real scene. You get the card, you read, describe a time you helped someone, and your brain just goes white.
Yeah, and your face does that weird half smile like, please, brain, don't do this to me in public.
That's the moment we need to talk about because the problem isn't only English. It's pressure, memory, and timing all crashing together.
So let's say you remember helping a neighbor carry groceries. Fine, but if you only say, I helped my neighbor, the answer dies fast.
Right, because one point isn't a story yet. You need layers, like building a little bridge instead of throwing one brick and hoping it becomes a road.
Nice image. And in the exam, people often freeze up because they think they need the perfect story, when really, they just need a path forward.
Here's the first layer. What happened? Who was there? Where were you? What did you actually do?
For example, my neighbor dropped a heavy bag at the apartment entrance and I carried it upstairs for her. That's simple, concrete, and easy to start with.
Exactly. And notice how that gives you motion. The story is already moving, so you're not standing still in your own head.
Then comes the second layer, how it felt and what you noticed. This is where you can flesh out the moment.
You can say, she looked exhausted and I could see her hands shaking a little. Or, I felt nervous at first, then relieved when she smiled.
That's not extra decoration. That's the texture. It helps the listener see the scene, and it helps you keep going.
And if you're thinking, but what if I run out of words, then good news, you can buy time with a small phrase while your brain grabs the next detail.
I love that expression. Buy time sounds much better than my brain is buffering.
Exactly, and you can use things like actually, or the thing is, to keep the flow alive.
The third layer is the one most candidates forget why it mattered.
Looking back, you can explain the impact. Maybe that small help made her day easier, or it made you feel more confident speaking to strangers.
And this is where the answer gets depth. Without this layer, you've got an event. With it, you've got meaning.
Let's try a full mini answer together. Topic: helping someone.
Actually, I once helped my neighbor carry groceries upstairs. She had a lot of bags, and the stairs were steep. I remember one detail. Her phone kept ringing, and she looked really stressed.
Nice. And then you can add, looking back, I felt proud because it was a tiny action, but it clearly mattered to her. That's already a real part 2 shape.
Notice the structure, event, detail, meaning.
And the beauty is, you don't need a dramatic life story. You just need to flesh out ordinary moments in a smart way.
Let me push back a little, though. What if someone says, "This sounds nice, but my memory is bad, so I still won't have enough material"?
I get that concern, but that's missing the whole picture. You're not trying to remember every second. You're selecting one clear thread and expanding it.
But isn't that still risky? What if the one thread is too small?
Not if you know how to add the second and third layer. A tiny action can become a full answer if you describe the setting, the feeling, and the result.
So the issue isn't the size of the memory. It's the shape of the memory.
Exactly. And that's why this method is so useful under pressure.
You're basically turning a panic moment into a guided walk.
Yes, and if one detail starts to vanish, you don't freeze up. You circle back to the layer you already have.
Let's do one more practice case. Topic: a time you made a decision quickly.
I once helped a lost tourist find a train platform. I was in a hurry, but I still stopped.
He looked confused, and I remember the station was loud and crowded.
Looking back, I think it mattered because I learned I can stay calm and useful even when I'm busy.
That's 3 layers in less than 30 seconds, which is much better than my old method of talking in circles until the examiner looked like they wanted a snack break.
Same, and that's why the method works. It keeps you from trail-off mode.
And by the way, there is a phrase for this. It's called freeze up, and we'll break it down later.
For now, remember the shape, what happened, how it felt, why it mattered. That's the rescue ladder.
And if you follow it, your answer stops being a blank page and starts becoming a real conversation.
In a minute, we'll show you how to use that ladder in a live role play, so you can hear the difference in real time. So now we need to ask the hard question. Is this 3-layer method actually enough when your nerves kick in?
I'm not fully sold because in a real exam, people don't fail from bad structure alone. They fail because pressure scrambles everything.
That's fair, but the structure is exactly what keeps pressure from taking over.
Maybe, but if a student freezes up the second the card appears, a nice framework won't magically save them.
It won't be magic, no, but it can buy time while your brain catches up.
I still think that sounds a bit optimistic. If they only know one story, and that story doesn't fit, then they're stuck.
Then the real issue isn't the method. It's the lack of flexible practice. A person should learn to flesh out one memory in different directions.
But what if the memory is too small? I helped someone with a door sounds thin.
Then you make it bigger with detail, feeling, and meaning. You don't invent a different life. You widen the same moment.
So, you're saying the answer is not have more exciting experiences, but describe the boring ones better.
Exactly. And honestly, that's better training for the exam. Most Part 2 prompts are ordinary, so ordinary material is enough.
Okay, but let me challenge the pacing. If you spend too long on the first layer, you'll trail off before you reach the ending.
True, which is why the method needs a timer in practice, 30 to 40 seconds per layer, not a full novel for the first scene.
So you're not just teaching a structure, You teaching control.
Yes, control, pacing, and recovery. If one layer gets weak, you circle back instead of panicking.
Hold on, though. Isn't circle back just a fancy way of saying repeat yourself?
Not at all. Repeating yourself sounds empty. Circling back means you return to a useful detail from a new angle.
Give me an example.
If you said, I carried the bags upstairs, you can circle back later with, and that's why I felt responsible for helping her. Same event, deeper meaning.
Okay, that's better than repeating the same sentence with different clothes on.
Exactly. And that's the difference between sounding stuck and sounding deliberate.
Let's do the practical test. Suppose the topic is describe a time you waited for something.
Great. Start with the event. I once waited outside a clinic for 2 hours.
Then the second layer, it was hot, and I remember the chairs were uncomfortable, so I kept shifting around.
Nice. Now the third layer, looking back, that wait taught me patience, and it made me respect other people's time more.
Fine, but a lot of students will still trail off after the second layer because they can't think of the third.
That's why the third layer should be trained as a habit. Ask yourself one question after every memory. Why did this matter?
So the exam answer is less about creativity and more about having a repeatable mental route.
Exactly, and the route becomes automatic with practice.
But I'd argue that some learners overuse the framework and start sounding mechanical.
That can happen if they memorize transitions without the story underneath. The trick is to let the story lead and let the phrases support it.
So the method itself isn't the problem. Bad delivery is.
Right, and delivery improves when you rehearse aloud, not just silently in your head.
Silent practice is sneaky like that. It makes you feel prepared right up until you open your mouth.
Let's do a mini role play, because this is where students usually need the correction.
Okay, I helped my neighbor, and then, she was happy. And, I don't know. That's it.
Stop. That answer sounds unfinished, because you're just listing fragments. You need a clear path, not a pile of words. 2 more natural ways. Actually, I helped my neighbor carry groceries upstairs, and it turned into a really warm moment. Or, the thing is, she looked exhausted, so I stayed a few extra minutes and made sure she was okay.
Okay, actually, I helped my neighbor carry groceries upstairs, and it turned into a really warm moment. She looked exhausted, and I could see she really appreciated it.
Better. Much better. You've got movement, detail, and meaning.
But what if the student still thinks, I don't have time to think this much in the exam?
Then we simplify the goal. You're not building a perfect speech, you're building a stable one.
So the mindset is small plan, fast execution, no drama.
Yes, and if the answer starts to wobble, you can buy time with actually, or let me give you an example, without sounding lost.
That part matters more than people think. A tiny pause can protect the whole answer.
And when that pause is followed by a new detail, the examiner hears control, not confusion.
So the real win is not talking nonstop. It's talking with direction.
Exactly. And if you remember one thing from this debate, remember this. Your goal is not to impress with volume. Your goal is to keep the story alive.
And if you're wondering whether this can really help under pressure, the answer is yes. But only if you practice it out loud before test day.
In the next part, we'll zoom into the 5 phrases we've already used, and you'll see how each one works in real exam talk.
That way, the method won't just make sense. It'll become usable.
So we've got the full rescue plan now. Event, detail, meaning, plus the little recovery moves.
And those recovery moves are exactly the phrases that keep your answer from dying mid-sentence.
Next, we're breaking down the 5 expressions we kept hearing in the story, one by one, in real context.
No dictionary vibes here, just natural use, clear meaning, and quick examples you can steal in the exam.
Let's go back to that awful exam moment for a second. The one where the card lands and your mind just goes blank.
Right? And the first useful phrase in that moment is freeze up. It means your brain kind of locks for a moment.
It's a very natural phrase, and it fits the exact problem we opened with. I totally freeze up when I see a hard Part 2 card.
That sounds human, not robotic, and it's much better than saying my cognition becomes temporarily unavailable.
Please never say that in an exam.
Now, the good thing is, you don't need to stay frozen. You can use buy time when you need a tiny pause.
Yes, and that phrase is perfect when you need a second to think without sounding empty.
For example, let me buy time with one detail is a bit odd, but I said that just to buy time sounds natural.
And in Part 2, you can buy time with things like actually or the thing is while you choose the next layer.
So it's not fake, it's a smart pause with purpose.
Exactly. It keeps the answer alive instead of letting it collapse.
The next one is the phrase that gave our story its shape, flesh out.
That one means to add useful detail and make an idea fuller.
So if your answer is too thin, you flesh it out with a place, a feeling, or a small visual detail.
Like, I helped my neighbor is fine, but I helped my neighbor and fleshed out the moment with the stairs, the heavy bags, and her tired face gives the listener something to see.
Heh, and suddenly the answer has a body instead of just a skeleton.
That's exactly the vibe. Then we had trail off, which is what happens when your sentence slowly fades away.
Oh, I know that one too well. It's when you start strong and then your voice just wanders off into the desert.
Beautifully said and painfully accurate.
In real life, you might say, I was helping her, and then I just trail off. But as a teaching phrase, it helps you notice the problem.
Yes, because once you can name it, you can fix it. Instead of trailing off, you can restart with a fresh detail.
That's the key. Notice the fade, then recover.
And the last one is circle back.
That means you return to a point you mentioned before, but with a little more direction or meaning.
Exactly. In Part 2, if you've already said the action, you can circle back to the feeling or circle back to the result.
So it's not repetition for the sake of repetition.
No, it's smart repetition. For example, I carried the bags upstairs, and if I circle back to that moment, I realized it made me feel calm and useful.
Nice. That sounds like a real speaker who's in control.
Let's stitch them together in one quick mini story.
I totally freeze up when I see a difficult card, so I try to buy time with a phrase like, actually, then I flesh out one small moment, and if I start to trail off, I circle back to the main feeling.
That's brilliant. Short, clear, and very exam-friendly.
Not glamorous, but neither is Part 2 when your brain is doing acrobatics.
Very true.
One thing I like is that these phrases also sound useful outside IELTS.
Totally. You can use them in presentations, interviews, or any moment when you need to keep talking with control.
And if you practice them with real topics, they stop feeling like vocab and start feeling like survival tools.
Which is exactly what they are. So today's rescue plan is simple in shape, even if it takes practice. Start with what happened, add one vivid detail, then circle back to why it mattered.
And when your mind blanks, don't panic. Use a phrase to buy time, then keep the story moving instead of letting it die.
That's the big takeaway. Part 2 isn't about having a perfect life story. It's about having a structure you can trust when your nerves show up.
Exactly. And the 5 phrases we use today are there to protect your flow, not replace your ideas.
Here are 3 practical things to try tonight. First, pick 5 random IELTS topics and spend only 30 seconds making a tiny 3-layer plan for each one.
Second, Speak out loud for 2 minutes, even if the answer feels rough. You'll notice where you freeze up, where you trail off, and where you need a better transition.
Third, after each practice answer, ask yourself one question. What detail could I flesh out next time? That single habit makes a huge difference.
And yes, your first version might sound messy. That's fine. Messy practice is still practice.
I still remember a time when I'd prepare so hard that I'd sound great in my head, then completely lose the thread the moment I started speaking.
Same here. I once had a near-perfect answer in my notes, then stared at the card like it had personally offended me.
Exactly, and that's why this method matters. It gives you something real to do when your confidence suddenly disappears.
You're not chasing luck anymore. You're building a repeatable way to stay in the conversation.
So try it with one topic today. Don't wait for the perfect mood, the perfect card, or the perfect memory.
Use the layers, use the pauses, and if you need them, use the phrases we toured. That's how you keep speaking for the full 2 minutes.
And in our next episode, we'll keep going with another speaking challenge that trips people up for completely different reasons.
Thanks for spending this time with us, and good luck turning panic into a plan.